But behind every religion, it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood of understanding that transcends the dogmatic barriers. So alchemists can commune with each other and talk with each other as magicians can, if you're using that terminology. Magicians aren't worried about the label that you're wearing. They're worried or interested in your depth of experience and understanding. And so perhaps magic is one term that we can use to help us negotiate in this great sea of knowing, to help steer us and empower us as well. Because one of the differences between following magic and the path of magic and following the path of religion is that magic is empowering. One of the differences and one of the reasons why it's separated from the world of dogmatic religions was because magic gets you involved. It's an active approach to the spiritual path. It's as if magic says, lets you into the kitchen and lets you play and explore with the materials. This is why it's scientific. I wonder what happens if we do this, and so on. Whereas conventional religions tend, on the whole, not always, tend to not to provide you with a meal. You tend to be in the restaurant rather than in the kitchen. But that's enough from me. If you have any thoughts or questions, let's use this time rather than it being a one-way process. Have I been talking complete nonsense? Describe the three paths of Bardo, Vatan, and Druid. Okay. When I was young, I had the good fortune to meet a magician. I was 11. My father taught history at a Crammer's. I don't think they exist anymore. Maybe they do. It's called a Crammer, where they a sort of tutorial kind of establishment. And the principal of the Crammers was the chief Druid. So I met him when I was 11. He was a family friend. He was like a kind of uncle figure to me. And so from an early age, I was introduced to the world of the Druids. And on the one hand, it seemed a strange world. You know, I was a teenager, it was the 60s, and then in the 70s, everything was changing. The people who were doing Druidry then were mainly elderly people, and who would do ceremonies on Glastonbury tour. I was initiated on Glastonbury tour when I was 18, and there were about just a dozen elderly gentlemen and ladies who would forget the words of their ceremonies and have to have little sort of cue cards on string around their necks and so on. So a part of me was thinking, what am I doing here? You know, while all my friends were partying and going to pop concerts and things. But the thing that kept me going was this sense of the magical tradition of these lands. The fact that, you know, driving, you know, when you drive and you see Glastonbury Tor for the first time, and it's just wonderful, and then you learn the legends and the stories and all the rest of it. And so the idea that we live in a magical landscape had always appealed to me immensely. And in 1969, 1968 and 1969 were sort of hugely significant times. The amount of stuff that happened, with, assassinations and the riots and Hair, the musical Hair appearing, and all sorts of things that you can tie together and see a massive sea change was occurring in the culture. And in 1969, John Lennon wrote a song called Mind Games, in which he talked about some kind of Druid dude. So something, Druid, parting the veil, the search for the Grail. Anyway, so if you listen to it, it's easy to miss it because there's a lot of music going on as well. But he talks about parting the veil. And in that same year, a sort of cult classic was born, A View Over Atlantis by John Michel, who died recently. And John Michel wrote this book where he brought together the ideas of Alfred Watkins about ley lines that had been developed in the 20s and 30s, with ideas of feng shui and geomancy and dowsing and so on, and numerology and magic, and brought them all together and presented us with this image of a magical landscape. And so there was this, and this is why I think John Lennon, for instance, was so interested in it. There was this opening to the fact that we live in a magical landscape. And so I joined the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And over the last, that was 40 years ago now. And over those 40 years, I've explored all sorts of different paths and studied psychology and psychotherapy and so on. But I've always come back to it. It's always acted as a kind of base and foundation for me. Because the three aspects of the bards, ovates, and druids, the bards are people who work with the power of the word and of song, of music, of dance, of the arts, and of memory. And they're the storytellers and the artists. And the fact that here was a spiritual group and a kind of magical philosophy that embraced the concept of creativity and encouraged it and had all sorts of ways and techniques to do that, to me seemed incredibly exciting. And as I started to learn the old stories and the mythology of these lands and so on, it helped me to feel at home in the world and at home in my country. And the ovates are the group of Druids who are interested in the power of the trees, of plants, of the natural world, of stones, of rocks, of earth energies, and also of the particularly elastic nature of time. So the ovates are concerned with divination and with oracles, with this idea not that you should or that you can read the future, like tuning in some kind of radio set that tells you what's going to happen next year, but instead that our particular construction of the passage of time is limited by our brains and the way we've been brought up and so on. And that in fact, there's a way in which the currents moving beneath linear time can be perceived through divination and so on. And so over the years, I've worked with this a lot, and together with my wife Stephanie, we produced the Druid Plant Oracle, which is where the idea of plants being of value came in the talk description there, the Druid Animal Oracle and the Druid Craft Tarot. And so that's the province of the ovates. And then the province of the Druids is the province of philosophy and teaching and working with the power of ritual and ceremony and with the rites of passage. Because one of the things I realized too is that however much one may feel that one can do without religion or a spiritual way, when the times get really tough or when significant events occur like deaths or births or marriages, as human beings it seems to me that we need ritual. We need to mark special events in some way. And then the question comes, how do you do it? And again, I have to mention Lewis, because I suspect we are the only town in the country that has a ceremony shop. We have a little shop where you can go and arrange an alternative funeral or wedding, or an idea I rather like is the idea of having a funeral before you die. Have you heard of that one? It's so that you don't miss all the eulogies. It's a bit spooky, but I mean, I wonder if anybody's done it. So, yes, so that was the answer.
I would like to hear you about crop circles. Do you think they're magical behind this?
Crop circles. Are crop circles magical? What do I think of crop circles? Do you know, I really don't know. All I know is that I was sitting outside the pub in Avebury one day with a friend who lived around there. And I said to him, what do you think of this crop circle business? It was at the time there was a lot of publicity about, the guys with the boards and the rope and everything. And he said, I've seen hundreds and hundreds. In my opinion, there are two kinds of crop circles. There are the fake ones and then there are the real ones. And he said, look, I'll take you to them. And we went and visited two. And there was one, and he said, look, this is obviously a hoax. And there was just it was fluffy around the edges, and it was. And then he drove me to another one, and it was just crisp. It like it had been punched out of the. It was just unbelievable, really. And that's all I know. I remember talking to John Michel. We interviewed when we did this book, when we did the Book of English Magic, when I sort of realized this incredible heritage that we have. Together with a friend, Richard Haygate, we decided to do a study on it. And it's a study that traces the story of magic from the sort of year dot right through to the contemporary period. And then gives you little, it's history, but then it also gives you little sort of experiments, if you like, to do, so you can taste what this actually is or was. And then Richard interviewed over 50 people for the book, about 25 of them got into the book, of